Hey Psychics, welcome back to a new video. I'm bringing you a new sculpture, this time of Naranchia from JJBA Bench Part 5. I'm trying to use some sculpture materials I still have as I'm saving up money for a trip later on this, like, pretty soon. At least in April. Okay, admittedly, I do get some more great sculpting later on in this video, and but that's specifically for the plane, which is called Aerosmith in the manga. It's actually, but in the localized version, it's called Little Bomber. Now, what I'm doing here is not a usual armature. This time, I'm doing segments of cardboard cut out and assembled together, almost like if you ever did one of those cardboard stick, like Tyrannosaurus Rex as a kid, like those kits. You just wedge in between. I'll probably put it up on the screen, but my plan was to use that as a way to make it lighter and to put the clay over on top. With added like foil as well, just to add a bit more filling. To put the clay over. And yeah, so I'm just assembling it. The larger pieces now, I had to cut the little holes a bit bigger, and you have to measure them to an extent that they fit, and then they fit a certain shape. And I think I was overall successful with that, but I also thought the main body itself was a bit too long. It's actually kind of a short stand in itself. This was the little round platform, I guess, to place the cardboard on. I thought it would be more stable when I initially shaped it. I shaped it from Milliput, by the way, a turquoise color, OLED version. Here I'm just cutting out the smaller bits, all these small intricate details. I'll be placing them on the mat very soon in a orderly fashion, if you call it that. And you'll see right here, one mistake I made is only measuring Aerosmith from the front and coming up with all the measurements that way, and it wasn't particularly accurate, although it came pretty close. I had other references at hand, as you'll see. The propellers, they ended up being just done with wire armature wrapped and with foil wrapped around it. Now, as you can see, the parts each have their little divots that I cut out with the X-Acto knife in a way that could fit what I was trying to construct, and that was the fins on the back of Aerosmith, as well as the small like circle, which I put something on top of it, like a support almost, and that's why I created those creases like in the cross section. I thought it would work as well, but some parts unfortunately needed to be glued in order not to shuffle while I was trying to carefully place the pieces in the right order. It was often very challenging just to hold this up. I had no real base to keep it upright. I had like a couple of clothesline pegs, and that was it. Yeah, obviously learning in hindsight, it wasn't a great idea. But but the obvious like general form of it was coming along really well. As for the rotating blades at the front, I used a ball with a hole in it, the ones you have to make bracelets with. Basically, I put like wire through that and then wrapped foil around it, and also created a little divot just to place it within the cardboard, for lack of a better technical term. Then I glued it down to secure it in, and I used copper wire for that. It's more easier to bend. I tried to put some support around it as well. It didn't quite end up sticking, however, unless I forced it to. Which is I could say a lot about different things for this sculpt in particular. If you notice in the middle of the construction there is a place for the cockpit that I wanted to, at one point I wanted to melt plastic in order to shape it to what I wanted that would allow it to be see-through and transparent like the real thing, but that was way too experimental for this type of thing, and it probably wouldn't behave as well if I had baked this with the clay. I decided just to go with clay and clay in the end result, but yeah, I start to tape it up and just to signal to myself where to place the end pieces, and the back. Some of these wing parts, they weren't as stable as I thought they would. In the final clay, in the clayed up version, they would be sticking out, and it caused a bit of problems in trying to complete the wings. A bit of frustration there. Yeah, pretty soon I would be adding the foil in little clumps that are rolled up of just aluminium foil, as you can see in the back of where the tail fins are. And there's also a double tail fin, one's facing parallel from each other. Oh, now we're onto the Naranchia sculpt, and I tried a cheap 2mm wire for this. Seemed to be quite good, quite bendable, and I wrapped foil around it. I'm not sure I would do that again, honestly. It didn't need to be bulked up that much, even though JoJo Anatomy basically is muscle men most of the time, even lean muscle men. It's all in good fun. I did try to define the muscles more to the style, because he would lead into more. His arms were quite thick, but at least his head was in proportion to his body, at least for his age. I think he's around 14, don't quote me on that, but that's his age in the manga. But he'll look very lean, of course, with muscles and kind of a big head, but he also has these choices of fashion that are interesting, to say the least. That goes for a lot of JoJo characters. But then now I start adding more muscles to define the figure itself. And this was the flesh colored clay that I was saving money with, at least for the time, and I think I did an okay job with just sculpting in the muscles, giving them proper definition. The jawline, he didn't need a larger jawline, but he was angular, to say the least. I think I had a good system for making the face with this one. I basically cross-sectioned off areas where the nose, eyes, and mouth would be, just so that I know where to dig in and know where to add. This is later on. I wish I had included it, but I like placed the clay parts very strategically, and also left areas where his eyes would be. I didn't want to form the full eyes themselves. I would rather like draw them like in Hiraki's manga style. I think that would be more fitting. So right now he's just looking like a Tibetan monk with some sunburn issues. I'm going to start adding. I'm gonna add his hands at some point, believe me. But I will be painting his skin a bit more lighter and not whitewashing him, even though he's technically Italian. But make of that what you will. Oh, this is where. Oh, at one point I tried to add Vaseline because I wanted to remove his hairstyle in order to paint it all over like with airbrush, but didn't in the end budge, and I didn't want to force it off. But it came out perfectly well, in my opinion. It's just funny to see his hair just clump on like that, knowing what happens in the end. I also had some orange Sculpey lying around, and that proved very useful. No paint over needed. I think the grey Sculpey is much more versatile, and I think I should focus on like sculpting into it, not worrying about so much the painting. I think that's my weakest point when making these. This was the parts of the I guess the leather straps he had on to his neck and torso. Like, oh wait, no, actually that's part of the plane. I lied. That's part of the cockpit. Fooled you there, I promise. Miracles are all live recording, huh? Now back to Naranchia. Way I sculpted his head on was an easy placement, just had to push in the right areas. I really got into the grey Sculpey at this point. I started using, there's also a Sculpey glue that only adheres like the clay to something when it is baked, so it sits there. Once you heat it up or like superheat it or put it in the oven, it'll harden, and the results were often mixed with this. I think like I said, the wings had bits of cardboard sticking out of them that weren't quite appropriate. Oh, and here's the bandana, if you want to call it, or where his hair sticking out very rebelliously, and I started with painting these with acrylic markers, cheap acrylic markers, no particular name brand. It's like Unco they called, and but they turned out pretty okay. They were easy to apply, unlike with some miniature paints. But at that time I hadn't had the good brushes I used, and I'm really happy how his overall costume came out. I even did little details that didn't seem too important, but really give it that impact. Especially the highlights in his hair and in his leather outfit. I tried to add the signature eyes from the manga himself. Form really doesn't follow, I guess, because It has a good silhouette, but it's not... it's flat on some areas, I'd say. But then again, it's good to be... It's good enough. It doesn't have to be too perfect. I think the orange clay was the best thing in hindsight. Finally, we're gonna add some black outlines to make it more striking and dramatic. Give it aura, whatever you prefer. Put some shadow areas, and at one point I add a highlight to his eyes. Make sure I add the dark dots first before I did that, and more or less it was a success. Cause here I like the downcast shadow his eyebrows gave, and now at this point I start assembling the base. I use balsa wood and I cut it myself in an interesting way. No measurements really. I just did it off by intuition and some hot glue, a little bit of that, and also a pin drill if you have one of those. I use them very often. This is a special fairy lights I bought for this one sculpture. Wasn't that cheap, wasn't that expensive really, it was just 10 bucks. True story. Then add staining just to darken up the balsa wood. It's very cheap actually. The balsa wood, not the not the staining, but it gives it, yeah, it lets you focus on the sculpture itself while being stable. I only had one coat. I think that's all I need, honestly. And I tried to get in every nook and cranny, even with my finger. It was okay. I think the again, it's not the best structure, but I think it works for what it's trying to do, and that's okay. So every visible part is now coated. I move on next to painting Aerosmith with the airbrush. Don't worry, I'm wearing full protective equipment. I have gloves and face mask on. I use just a simple box, and I have the windows open in a special place in the house, but I basically spraying flow improver gets it out really well. I had some teething issues with using this earlier on the airbrush, and it was rather consistent, the coverage, which was what I was hoping for, and got a nice even black coating. Basically 98% of it in my estimation, and thankfully it dried pretty quickly. It was like basically acrylics. It wasn't too bad. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. I think I did one coating at least, but that means I could paint Aerosmith now with miniature paints. Oh, I did forget the stand-like features, if you can call them that, of just little air fin. Like, I guess gills. They're more alien when you look at them up close, but they're essential part of the design overall. And I just wanted to add a bit more black just to blend it in, blend the whole thing in, and now it's completely primed and ready to paint. The color I wanted to start with was a magenta-like color, but unfortunately I found it was, if you ever paint miniatures with magenta, often it'll be like semi-transparent, and quickly discovered that and tried to correct it with a more medium red crimson almost, which is funny. It's actually considering the source material, but all was right in the end when I added that red, and the coverage was overall pretty smooth. I used these new, they're fairly cheap brushes for miniature painting. There was a 000 and it basically had no bristles to it, like barely any on it, just a nub at the end. True story. Oh, the lighting is not that great in this, but I guess you can see what I'm mostly doing. I end up covering every exposed part, but also now I'll move on to the metal bits. Very tight spaces, tight spots to paint them. If I don't want to like lift it up by the stem, it's tricky in some places. And now I'm here I'm just adding the yellow, and I'm disappointed once again that how just like disappointing my yellows are. And I decided to move on to use once again the acrylic markers from just a bland name brand company, and they turned out pretty well for what I paid for. And just at this point I just add the rest of the paint from the acrylic markers, and I add a bit of a highlight effect with the white paint later on. A bit of cerulean blue here for the windows. I wish it was like transparent, but I think it turned out alright in the end. Some little golden highlights. And now on to the finished result. Enjoy. So yeah, I think after this I won't be doing a lot of diorama pieces because there's just too much to take on all at once, and I think the results speak for themselves. But otherwise it was a really good attempt. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments below, and thank you all for watching. I promise the next one will be even better. But in the meantime, cheers, and have a good day.